everybody! Welcome to the Jayda InStitches show. It's time to add another basic repeater stitch to our stitch repertoire. Today I'm talking about the V-stitch. Now the V in V-stitch technically refers to the shape that is created as you're working this pattern. But in my mind, V stands for versatile and variations. The V-stitch is versatile. I myself have used the V-stitch in a multitude of projects, not limited to hats, scarves, sweaters, cardigans, shawls, cloaks, baby blankets. It's a really simple repeater, and so it lends itself to a lot of different projects. You can use it just about anywhere. And it's very, very varied. There's a lot of different variations on the V-stitch in the height of the V, so what sort of stitch you use to create the V, or how often it repeats, or whether it's sandwiched in with other stitches. So you will definitely encounter the V-stitch many, many times over your crochet careers. But today we are going to focus on my personal favorite variation of the V-stitch, which is the small variation of the V-stitch, done using the half double crochet version. And it creates this really cute little lacy effect without really any work at all. And it looks something like this. So you can see the tiny little V's that are created using this particular pattern. But overall it has this adorable little almost star effect or tiny little eyelet effect. And I just love how cute and sweet and lacy this looks without really having to work a complicated stitch pattern. And of course today we're going to use this pattern to work one of my favorite sampler sized projects, a dishcloth. I'm using cotton today because cotton makes a great dishcloth. It's really washable and it retains its shape and color well. And just so you guys can flesh out your project journals yet again, we've got a free version of this pattern up on our website, so you can scuttle over there, grab that free copy of the V-stitch pattern, come on back and follow along with me as we do this tutorial, and you'll get another opportunity to understand how a pattern is written and also see how a repeater pattern is written, because sometimes they look a little bit different. So once you've got that, plus your cotton yarn, we can head to the craft table and get started. For today's V-stitch tutorial, I'm using a worsted weight cotton yarn because cotton makes great dishcloths. I'm using a 4.25 millimeter hook, or a G6, but you can use a bigger one if you want, a 4.5, a 5 millimeter, or even a 5.5 millimeter. You need a pair of scissors and a yarn needle, one with an eye big enough for the yarn you're using. And once you've got all those things, we can get started. We are going to begin with a slip knot. Now this pattern can be worked across a foundation chain row that is a number that is any multiple of 3. So for this particular dishcloth, I am going to begin with a chained foundation row of 30. So 30 chains, 30. Once you have your chained foundation row, in this case I've made 30, so make sure it's a multiple of 3, we're going to work the half double crochet stitch to create our V-stitch pattern. So you're going to identify the first 3 chains from the hook, so there's 1, 2, 3, skip those, put your thumb on the 4th, and you're going to half double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. And remember, a half double crochet is you wrap before you pick up a loop in the stitch, so you should have 3 loops on your hook just as though you were going to double crochet, but instead of doubling, we're just going to wrap our yarn and pull back through everything. That is a half double crochet. So your first little stitch is going to look something like this at the end, and I know it looks a little bit bulky, but don't worry, it'll iron itself out. For the V-stitch, you need to chain 1 to create a bit of a spacer, and then still working into that same chain, that 4th chain from the hook, you're going to wrap your yarn, half double crochet back into that same chain, and that is your first V-stitch. A little difficult to see, so we're going to do another one. Skip 2 chains. So there's 1, there's 2. Skip 2 chains, and you're going to half double crochet into the 3rd chain. So there's 1, there's 2, here's number 3. And remember, working that foundation chain row It's always a little bit tricky because everything feels a bit fiddly. You don't have a firm grasp on your fabric yet, so you remember to take your time. Your foundation chain row and then your first row always feels a little funny. It's because you're establishing the first row of your pattern. So there's our half double crochet. That's 1/2 of the V-stitch. Chain 1. That puts a space between your half double crochet, so 1/2 of the V-stitch. Half double crochet back into the same place. Try not to split your yarn. And there you go. That one's a little easier to see. So there's that sort of distinct V shape happening. And there's also sort of an inverted V space between your two V stitches. So let's try another one. Skip 2 chains. So there's 1, 2. Identify the third. Half double crochet into it. Chain 1 for that little spacer, so you've worked half your V-stitch, and then half double crochet back into the same chain. So a V-stitch is half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into the same stitch. And there it is. We'll do another one together. Skip 2 chains, find the third, half double crochet into it, chain 1, and half double crochet into the same place that you just half double crocheted into. So half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. So the pattern is half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into the same stitch, skip 2 stitches, and repeat the V-stitch into the third. So you're going to work that across the rest of your foundation chain row. Skip 2 chains, work half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into the third chain, and that should take you all the way across your foundation chain row. Once you've worked that V-stitch pattern all the way across your foundation chain row, when you get to the end, you should have 2 chains left after your last V-stitch. You're going to skip 1 chain and work a half double crochet into the last chain. And you'll see that that is mirrored all the way back at the beginning. We created sort of this corner piece here as the first 3 chains that I had you skip counts as a half double crochet and a space. So it's a little difficult to see there, but it'll make sense once you get moving along through the rest of this pattern. So that is the foundation chain row and the first row of your pattern established. You're going to chain 2. So the chain 2 counts as a half double crochet. You're going to flip your work, and here's where the pattern becomes really, really easy from here on out. So you're going to find that first V you made, stick your finger in it so that you can see the chain 1 space, and you're going to work your V-stitch into that space. So you don't have to work stitches anymore, you're just looking for spaces. So we're going to work half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into that space in that V-stitch from the previous row. Skip over to the next V-stitch, find the next chain 1 space in between it, and work another V-stitch. Half double crochet, chain 1, and half double crochet. All right, let's do another one. Here's the next V-stitch. There's the space in between them. Half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet. There we go. And you'll probably notice as you're watching me crochet here that sometimes my yarn wants to split on me. That's because I'm using a crafter cotton. While this makes great fabric for dishcloths and other sort of domestic items around the house, it's really easy to wash and it holds up well, the spin is not very tight. You see it looks kind of loose? So it does tend to want to separate on you. So this is great yarn to use for domestic things, but it does it does split a little more than your average yarn. So if you are using crafter cotton, just bear that in mind. Half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet into the middle of the next V-stitch, and so on. And that is the pattern established. And it looks something like that. Isn't that cute? This is why I love this version of the V-stitch so much. Alright, I'm going to let you finish row 2 all by yourself. I'll catch up with you right at the end, and then we'll just do row 3 together, and I'll let you guys work on the V-stitch pattern all by yourself. Alright, you've worked all the way across row 2. It looks something like this. Every single V-stitch, which is half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet, is worked into the middle of the V-stitch from the row previous. So you get this sort of nice little lacy effect going. Once you get to the end, you should have something that looks like this. That's the chain 3 at the very beginning of our work. You're going to sort of count from the bottom up. So there's 1 chain, there's 2, there's 3. You want to sort of half double crochet into the top of that chained, turning chain thing. Basically, don't work your half double crochet into the top of your last half double crochet stitch. You want the chain right next to it. And from here on out, that's a little bit easier. And that's row 2 completed. So row 3 and every row after is exactly the same as the row before. You chain 2 to begin. This counts as a half double crochet. Chain your work, turn your work, find your first V-stitch, find the middle of it, and work another V-stitch into the middle of that previous row's V-stitch. So every V-stitch is worked directly into the middle of a V-stitch from the row before. Every V sits directly on top of the one from the row before. So that's another way you can kind of make sure that you're not getting off track. So you're not working into the spaces in between them, you're working into the spaces of the actual V-stitch, so the middle of the V-stitch. And that's all you have to do. You just keep working that V-stitch all the way across, every single row. When you get to the end of the row, you work a half double crochet into the top of the turning chains from the previous row, so it should only be the chain 2, that's the turning chains from the previous row. Chain 2 to begin your row, that counts as a half double crochet, and then just start V-stitching into the middle of the next V-stitch. You can continue this pattern back and forth for as long as you like. I'm going to work this stitch until I have a nice square looking piece of fabric, because I like my dishcloths to be on the square side, but of course you can make yours rectangular if you like. Anyway, just consider it a good sample starter. Remember, when you get to the end of the row, find that chain 2. If you have to flip it over to sort of see the tops of the chain, you can do that too. You just don't want to work the top of the stitch. You want to work the chain that's right next to it. And that will keep your edges nice and flat. There you go. Such a cute stitch. I just love it. So cute. Alright, chain 2 to begin your next row, and so on and so on. Off you go! You can work your V-stitch for as long as you like, and I'll catch up with you once you've finished the bulk of your dishcloths. Alright, I have worked 15 rows in total of my V-stitch pattern. I have what looks like a pretty nice square working out here, and here is how you can quickly count your rows. So you look at the bottom, there's your foundation chain row. You can identify a V, so where 2 different stitches come out of the same little stitch, and just count directly up from there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Or you can try and count the little holes that all sit on top of each other. Either way, you can count up pretty easily. And now if you like the way it looks, you can just fasten off, weave in your tails, and go about washing some dishes. Or if you want to add a little single crochet border, like I like to do with most of my little dishcloth projects, you can do that with me now. So because working single crochet down a raw side of anything takes a little bit of finagling here and there, I'm going to walk you through this one.
So I've got 15 rows. I was using the half double crochet stitch. And because the chain 2 at the end of each row counts as a double crochet, you might think that that would translate into how many single crochets you should work. So if you've got 15 rows, it's a chain 2 that counts as a turning chain, then you double up you'd have like 30 single crochets working down the side. But you know what? That's probably going to be too many. So like any of these little projects, I like to chain 1 and just start steadily working in single crochet down one edge. I count how many I do, so it doesn't matter how many I do what I think looks right. And then I make a note of that somewhere so that I can work the same number up the other side. Now, from experience, I can tell you that I'm probably going to work somewhere between 18 and 20 single crochets down the side of this little dishcloth. And I know that because I'm not going to work one single crochet into each chain or work a single crochet into each end of every row. I just know that while I'm working, I'm going to stop every so often, hold it out in front of me, and decide if I like the spacing. I don't want my work to get pulled together. I also don't want it to be sort of fanned out because I've worked too many stitches. So that's what I recommend. There's no real science to this. This is literally subjective. You're going to work the single crochet stitch into the edges of your rows, but only the number that looks right to you. And that goes for a lot of these kinds of projects. You want to sit back every so often and make sure that it looks good. Add some, remove some. Sometimes that does mean taking a few out. There often is a little bit of trial and error that goes along with this kind of work. If you need to put 2 in the same place just to get the same kind of evenness going, well, you can do that too. Just make sure you count the number that you've got down the side of your dishcloth so that you can work the same number up the other side. So you can work away at that until you get down to the corner, and then we'll do one of the easier parts of the border. Alright, I've ended up working 20 single crochets down the side of my square. And 20 is nice. It's a nice even number. I can remember it easily. But I think it looks nice and even and flat. And that's what I was going for. So it doesn't really matter how many you end up working, so long as you like the way it looks. Now all that's left is to work another single crochet into that bottom corner so that I have a nice rounded edge happening. And then I'm just going to work a single crochet into each of the chains available to me across the bottom of my dishcloth. So now we're working chains in the sort of the underside of our foundation chain row. And you may have started with 30 like I did, but remember some of those turned into turning chains at the end. So more than likely you'll have roughly 26 or 27 single crochets across the bottom. But you don't really have to worry so much about the stitch count, just so long as it looks even and you haven't sort of doubled up or missed any. So once again, you just want a border that's nice and even, worked across the bottom. Then you can work 2 single crochets in that corner, work the same number of single crochets up your other raw side that you worked here. So in my case, I did 20, so I'm going to make sure that I have 20 up this side. Work 2 single crochets into that corner, and then the really easy part, just working single crochets across the top of your last pattern row. So I'll let you work on your single crochet border, and then I'll hook up with you back at the end. Remember, when you get back round to the top of your dishcloth, don't forget to work either the space or the actual chain stitch across your V-stitch pattern, because you don't want to accidentally shorten up the number of stitches you should be working. So if you need to work sort of the center space instead of the actual chain, remember just to do that. If you can actually pick up and use the chain, I like to do that just because it kind of keeps that nice even look going across the top, but it's entirely up to you. Whatever's easiest, I always say. And yeah, so make sure you don't forget those chain 1 spaces, because otherwise you'll end up with a very tight looking top row and you'll be wondering why. Okay, I have worked the first raw edge. I did 20 down that side, worked the bottom, worked 20 up the other side, worked across the top, all in single crochet. That is my border row. I am content with that. If you want to add another row or 2 or 3, it's entirely up to you, but I just want to basically finish off my edges. And like most of my dishcloths, I like to put a little hanger on. So before I finish up my final corner, I'm going to chain 12. So a nice chain of 12, and then back into the same place I chained out of, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first single crochet of my border row, and that is my little dishcloth. Grab your scissors, also grab your yarn needle. You can cut off a little bit of a tail, fasten off by pulling it back through the loop on your hook. Give it a nice tight tug. Grab your yarn needle and then just weave that tail back and forth through the backs of that single crochet border row, and it will completely disappear.
And there you have it. That is my favorite variation on the V-stitch, or the half double crochet V-stitch variation. Makes a really cute dishcloth, among other projects. Have you tried different V-stitch variations? If you have, leave me a comment down below. What's your favorite? Do you like the really tall V's? Do you like the short V's? Do you like the V's that are separated with other stitches? What do you like? And that is it for this week, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you again very soon on the Jayda InStitches show. Until then, stay safe, stay crafty, and have an awesome week.